We can often overcomplicate things in our self-development journeys, and we can sometimes forget that it's the small, simple things that sometimes makes the most difference. That's why in this video, we're gonna talk about 5 simple 1-minute habits that we can start taking today to start increasing and even 10xing our productivity. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jorge Calaos. I'm a business lawyer based in Florida, specializing in high-stakes lawsuits, and in this channel, we explore the principles and the strategies to help us live more productive, meaningful, and fulfilling lives. Productivity habit number 1, the 1-minute task check. Part of what I do in this channel is I talk a lot about the systems that I use to organize my life and to be more productive. Those systems include my email system, my follow-up system, and my task system. Now, I've talked a lot about to-do lists in my previous videos, but I've realized that it's better to use the term task list instead of to-do list. Now, the reason for this is because the phrase to-do list implies that these things must be done. And the problem with this is that it creates this overwhelming pressure to complete every single idea that comes into our mind. And quite simply, especially if you're a creative person, you're gonna have a lot of ideas and you're not gonna be able to execute on every single one of them. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that you're not a productive person. It just means that we as humans have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of energy, and we must channel that time and that energy into the most high impact activities. And so while I'm a big proponent of writing down every useful idea that you have, putting it on something called a to-do list makes you feel like these things have to be done or something bad will happen. But when you put it on what's called a task list, these are simply tasks that could be useful, that could be helpful, that could generate the kind of results that you want, but they don't necessarily have to be done. In other words, if they don't get done, it's not the end of the world. And I've noticed that having that freedom and that air to breathe actually makes me more productive. Now, let me go into my personal task list system and how I'm able to keep track of every idea that comes into my brain, at least every useful idea, so that it doesn't fall through the cracks. It's actually pretty simple. Anytime something comes into my head and I think it's useful, I write it down somewhere and I make sure that it somehow ends up into my master task list. So I can write it down on a piece of paper, I can write it down on a sticky note, I can email it to myself, and then when I'm going through my emails with my email system, which I also talk about in this channel, I will eventually look at that email, and that email will remind me to put this task into the master task list. And then from that master task list, I break it down so it's either, content, lawyer stuff, personal stuff. So that way my master task list is categorized, and then at the beginning of every week, I take from that master task list and I plan my week. And so because I'm reviewing that master task list every single week, the chances of something somehow falling through the cracks are very, very low. And so there's multiple, let's just say, layers of how I check these lists. The first list that I check is the master task list, and I check that once a week, usually on Sundays. And not only do I check it, but I cross off the things that were done during the week, and then I update it with new things that I want to get done. And then from that list, like I said, I create the weekly list, and then from that weekly list, sometimes I create a daily list, sometimes not, sometimes I just check it off the weekly list if there's not a lot of things on the weekly list. But after I complete tasks throughout the week, I go through the list again to make sure that I'm refreshed on what it is that I have to do. Because sometimes if you go too long without checking the list, you start to kind of become overwhelmed because you haven't seen it on paper for a long enough period of time. And so it's kind of just ruminating over in your head. And so when you see it on the paper, it takes it out of your head, puts it onto the paper, clears your head so that you can get right back to it. Productivity habit number 2, the 1-minute scenery change. Now, I'm willing to bet that if you're watching this, you probably work in the same spot every single day. And that's fine, that's completely normal. We mostly work in our office. I work in my office most of the time. But when I feel myself just blankly staring at the screen and procrastinating on things that I have to do, one thing that is very useful for me is to change my environment. To literally get up from my chair, move out of my office and go into the kitchen or into the living room or into the bedroom if it's a more chill type of work. Or if I really want a really strong scenery change, I'll go to a coffee shop, I'll go to a Starbucks, I'll go to a library, a Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. And so what this does is that it resets my environment and my mind gets placed in a different environment where it has to shift the way it's operating because it's operating in a different environment. And so it kind of refreshes the mind, and I find that this works really well, particularly for creative tasks. Like, for example, if you have writer's block, I always do this when I have writer's block. I just go somewhere else, and the new environment will unlock new ideas that helps me get unstuck. So next time you have writer's block, or next time you're just staring at the screen trying to figure out what to do, Get up, go to the kitchen, go to the living room, go to a Starbucks, go to Barnes & Noble, go somewhere, go to your mom's house. I don't know, go to your friend's house. That change in environment can shift your brain in such a way that it can unlock what's been stuck. Productivity habit number 3, the 1-minute phone block. Take a minute to set certain restrictions on your phone. My guess is if you're watching this, you're probably watching it on your phone, and you probably agree that your phone is, if not the most distracting thing in your life, it's definitely like top 3. And so if we can set restrictions on it, we can increase our productivity, obviously. Now there's 3 things that I personally do. 2 of them are apps and 1 of them is a setting on my iPhone. The first app is called App Block, and it allows you to set certain restrictions for certain apps. And so I have that on my phone right now, and the way I set it up is that I can't go on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, and I think something else unless it's between 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. when I'm eating lunch or working out, and 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. after I'm done working up until around the time that it's time to go to bed and start reading. And so if it's not between 11 a.m. or 1 p.m. or 6 p.m. and 9 p.m., I can't check those apps. Now, granted, you can go on App Block and undo this, but not only do you feel a little bit ashamed doing it, but it also adds a certain level of friction because you have to go onto the app, you have to undo the thing, and it's just a pain. You can't just pick up your phone and just go on the app. Now, the other app that I've used is 1Sec, and what that does is similar to what App Block does, which is create a certain level of friction. What that app does is when you open certain apps and you choose which apps this applies to, the 1Sec app pops up and it takes you through a little animation to breathe in and breathe out that takes somewhere between 5 and 10 seconds, and only once that animation is over can you actually access the app that you were trying to access. And so again, that prevents you from impulsively going on your phone and clicking on the app, because you can impulsively pick up your phone and click on the app, but then you're gonna have to wait 5 to 10 seconds to access the app. And oftentimes when you impulsively pick up your phone and 1Sec pops up, you just say, you know what, it's not worth it. And that actually ends up saving you a ton of time. And finally, I have a setting on my iPhone that restricts my use of my social media apps to 1 hour per day collectively. So if I spend 30 minutes on Facebook and 30 minutes on Instagram, that's 1 hour and they all shut off. Now again, you can undo this on the phone, obviously, but you would be surprised at how much that added friction reduces the amount of time that you waste on your phone. Productivity habit number 4, the 1-minute rule. Now, I honestly feel like I talk about this in every single one of my videos. I'm pretty sure in the past 7 to 8 videos that I filmed, I've talked about it maybe in 3 or 4 of them. But the reason that I do it is because I believe in it so much and it's just been so useful in my life. What the 1-minute rule states is that if something takes less than 1 minute to do, you should just do it. Now, why does this work? The reason that this works is that we tend to equate the fact that something takes a small amount of time with the fact that it's not that important. But the fact of the matter is that just because something is quick and easy to do doesn't mean that it's not important, even if our brain reaches that conclusion. And so because our brain often reaches that conclusion, we end up having all these tasks piled up. And when we have all these tasks piled up, we know that they're piling up, and on some level we know that they're important. And so this pile of tasks is taking up a lot of mental bandwidth in our minds. And so we can just sit down and figure out what are the important tasks that I can do right now that would take less than 1 minute to do, and just knock them out one after the other, after the other, after the other. Within 30 minutes, we can reduce so much mental bandwidth that we are using, and we can reduce so much stress and overwhelm and frustration with literally just 30, maybe 60 minutes. That's why I love this rule so much, is because you get so much bang for your buck. You put so little input to get so much output. And the way you take this to another level is to be consistent with the 1-minute rule, so these things don't even pile up in the first place. And by the way, if this concept of mental bandwidth interests you, I'll link the video that I made about mental bandwidth, how to manage it, what it is, how to manage it, everything about mental bandwidth. I'll link that video up here. And finally, productivity habit number 5, the 1-minute push. Now, the important thing to remember about this is that in order for this to work, we have to have a focus of starting small and building up over time. In other words, having a Kaizen, or what Kobe Bryant called a Black Mamba mentality of just getting better today than you were yesterday. The way this works is that every time you feel resistance to doing something, just push through, block it out for just 1 minute and push through and start doing the thing for 1 minute. Now, again, that might seem really simple and, oh, of course, the way to beat procrastination is just to stop procrastinating. But the reason this works is for 2 reasons. Number 1, when you start doing this, you're not going to be perfect at it all the time. There will be plenty of times where the resistance will win and you won't be able to push through, but you will be able to push through some of the time. And so let's say you're watching this video in December and you're trying to improve your life in 2025. Let's say that in January you pushed through only only 5% of the time. 5% of the time is still better than 0% of the time, because what that 5% of the time will do is it'll build the belief in your brain that you can do it at least some of the time. And so then by the time February comes around, you might be able to do it 10% of the time, and then in March 20% of the time, and then in April 25, and then in May 35, and so on and so forth. In other words, every time you succeed, you start to change the belief in your mind of what kind of person you are and what you are capable of. The second reason this works is that the push is only for 1 minute, and so you really only have to commit to 1 minute of doing the thing, which is much easier than convincing yourself to push through the entire thing. But what ends up happening is that once you've been doing it for 1 minute, a certain level of momentum builds up that's going to make it easier for you to keep going. And actually, I'll throw a third reason why this works, which is that whenever you feel resistance, oftentimes it's your inner demons coming to the surface. And so every time you successfully push through, you are shutting up those inner demons. And every time you shut up those inner demons are losing their power over you. And you, me, and everybody else has these inner demons. And the more that we can lower the volume on these inner demons, the better lives we are going to live. This is by far one of the best strategies I've ever found to turn the volume down on those inner demons. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I think you'll also enjoy this video that I made called 5 1-minute habits that 10x'd my focus. And as always, if you like this kind of content and want to see more of it, make sure you join the community by subscribing to the channel and click the link in the description box below where you can join my weekly email newsletter where I send you content like this every week, every Monday via email to get you started for the week. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video.